The smoke was thick, rolling through the lobby like a dark tide. Screams echoed from the stairwell as the fire alarm blared in frantic rhythm. People stumbled, coughing, clutching briefcases and phones, their polished shoes slipping on the marble floor. And there he was, just a man in a faded delivery jacket, holding a bag of takeout, standing at the edge of the chaos. "Move! Don't just stand there!" one of the suited men barked at him, eyes wide with panic. But the delivery man didn't flinch. His gaze swept the crowd, sharp, calculating, as though he had seen this before. Then his voice, low but commanding, cut through the hysteria. "Stairwell B is blocked. Follow me. There's another way." Reluctantly, a few followed. Others hesitated. But when the ceiling tiles above cracked and flames licked downward, hesitation vanished. They ran after him. Ethan Cole used to say that the first thing you learn about fire is that it speaks. Not in words, but in a grammar of heat and pressure. Whispers that curl along a ceiling, the sudden hush before a flashover, the crack-pop of joists complaining under a red burden. He learned its language the way some boys learn scales on a piano, one blister at a time, until his hands and lungs and nerves could translate danger at a glance. He wasn't born into it. There was no family line of firefighters to mimic, no father's bunker coat to grow into. Ethan grew up in a second-floor walk-up above a corner laundromat in Dorchester, Boston, with a mother who worked nights at a rehab clinic and left Post-it notes on the fridge. "Leftover stew. You're my favorite person." When he was 12, a small grease fire in the unit across the hall sent smoke into their kitchen and turned their building into a cough-filled anthill. He remembered how the men of Ladder 12 arrived, calm as surgeons, quick as wolves. One of them, helmet visor up, eyes kind, crouched to his height and said, "You okay, buddy? You did good getting out fast." Ethan nodded, stare fixed on the man's turnout gear, the reflective striping like a superhero's uniform in the streetlight. After that, his notebooks were filled with engines and ladders sketched in the margins, and his mother stopped trying to steer his imagination toward anything safer. In high school, he volunteered with the Fire Explorers. He learned about hose couplings and hydrant wrenches, about SCBA masks, and how air becomes courage when it hisses steady at your cheek. He learned that doors are teachers. You touch them with the back of your hand, feel what they have to say, respect them when they shout, "Don't." He could carry a full-size dummy down a stairwell without banging its head on the rails before he learned to dance. On weekends, he'd jog past the station on Adams Street, slowing just enough to listen to the truck idle and imagine the ripple in the air when the tones dropped, the way an ordinary moment shivers and fractures into the kind where your choices matter. At 21, he made probationary firefighter, Boston Fire Department, Ladder 12. An academy of gray dawns and wet socks followed. They crawled in blackout masks through plywood mazes while instructors banged on the walls and yelled. They learned to count steps by kneecaps, to trust the human chain of glove to boot to bunker coat. The day they introduced the flashover simulator, a steel container blooming with fire that licked down like a hungry cat, Ethan felt not fear but recognition. He watched the flames roll across the ceiling and thought, "I know this music. I can play along." He met Ryan Dempsey in the academy yard, both men elbow-deep in a cranky pump panel. Ryan had a grin that could coax a laugh out of a headstone, a compact build that hid ridiculous strength, and a habit of singing the wrong lyrics to classic rock just to see who would correct him. On the first snow of their rookie winter, Ethan slipped on black ice hauling a coil of 3-inch hose and nearly took down 2 instructors. Ryan caught him by the collar and said, chuckling, "Easy, Cole. Save the dramatic swan dives for rescue school." They were paired for drills, then for calls, then for off-duty beers where they traded stories they didn't yet know would matter. Ryan had a daughter, Emma, whose drawings of fire trucks were pure red rectangles with wheels. Ethan had his mother, always with aching feet and gentle iron words. "Be brave.
Yes, but also be kind. The job taught him to build rituals. He checked his gear obsessively. Helmet, hood, coat, pants, boots, gloves, mask straps flat, regulators seated, Halligan and flathead married with tape, irons riding in the same place every time. He learned the feel of the Halligan's adze against a locked door, the sweet surrender of a deadbolt giving way, the heartbeat of a building through the floor. He learned that people didn't always run when they should, and sometimes they ran in the wrong direction, and sometimes they were small and hidden under beds, and sometimes they were big and heavy and terrified, and there wasn't time for anything except to get them out, now. He also learned what smoke does to you. It lives in your hair even after 3 showers. It sits in your sinuses like a memory. It tucks itself into your clothes so that months later, you'll open a drawer and the past will touch your face. Some nights after a hard job, he'd stand in the station shower and watch black water coil toward the drain and feel, strange as it was, clean in a way that had nothing to do with soap. The calls blurred into seasons, kitchen fires gone violent, car wrecks steaming on the expressway, alarms that were nothing, and alarms that were everything. He and Ryan developed a language, a head tilt that meant you go left, a squeezed shoulder that meant I've got you. Before a push upstairs, they'd bump helmets, a knock-knock benediction, and Ryan would say, "We're getting coffee after this, Cole, so don't get dead." Ethan would answer, "Copy that, Dempsey. You can buy." The night that carved his life into before and after was February, a wind like a knife slipping between the gaps in your coat. The warehouse on the edge of South Boston used to be for furniture. Lately, it had been for something else, imported odds and ends stacked high in narrow aisles. A fire had started on the 2nd floor, ran the racks, and woke up mean. The first companies went interior, reported heavy heat, poor visibility, fast-moving conditions. Ladder 12 was assigned search and vent. Ethan and Ryan masked up, checked each other's straps, and went in through a side door that groaned as if it had something to confess. Inside was a maze of metal shelving and smoke that crawled low too fast, a bad sign. Ethan's gloves slid across cardboard, then plastic. He could hear the fire before he could see it, a freight train behind a wall, angry, hungry. They advanced, duck-walking, tools brushing the floor, keeping a hand on the rack like a ship's rail in a storm. Ethan's Halligan found a jammed interior door. Ryan swung the flathead, 2 clean hits, the beautiful music of work well done, and the door surrendered. They found the first civilian in a pocket of cleaner air, slumped behind a stack of rugs, breathing, but limp. Ethan lifted him, lift with your legs, keep your back straight, become a machine, and the 3 of them retreated to the threshold, where other hands took the burden and carried it outward toward the cold. Back in again, because that's what you do. The second civilian coughed herself awake when they put a mask on her. She was crying for her brother, my brother, and they told her without telling her, "We will look." Time in a good fire does strange things. It flies and it thickens both. Ethan and Ryan moved through it like swimmers in dark water, trusting their training, trying to make the building smaller by taking it 1 narrow aisle at a time. Their radios crackled with other lives, Engine 45 calling for more line, Ladder 9 reporting a heat push, command asking about the roof. Somewhere above, a window shattered, wind knifed in, and the fire changed its mind. Ethan found the 3rd civilian by accident, a shoe under a tarp. He tugged, revealed a foot, a leg, a man curled small as a child. He got him up, heavy, terrified, and Ryan shepherded them back toward the side door. 40 feet, 30. The air changed. Pressures shift in a fire. You can feel it in your teeth. Something boomed to their right, and the industrial shelving shivered. Ethan yelled for Ryan and for the man to go. "Go now as fast as you can." And then the ceiling swallowed a flame and spat out a beam, and the beam dropped like a hammer. Ethan saw it coming in the corner of his eye, twisted, shoved the civilian forward so the beam wouldn't take his skull clean off, and the beam caught Ryan's shoulder and helmet and knocked him from his feet. The sound Ryan made wasn't a word. It was raw electricity. "Mayday! Mayday! Firefighter down!" Ethan heard himself shout, voice too calm for the ice in his veins. He pried at the beam, shoulders screaming, legs finding a leverage his mind didn't know. The world telescoped to the point where his hands met steel and fire pressed its face close to his. He gave inches, then a fraction more. Ryan breathed under there, ragged and furious. "Got you," Ethan said, because sometimes that's what you have. And then the fire showed that it didn't care about words. Heat rolled over them like a living thing. Some structural member let go with a sound like a god coughing. The incident commander was calling them by name on the radio. The RIT team was coming. The beam didn't move enough. Ethan's air ticked down to its last minutes, and he knew the math and hated it and tried anyway. Hands closed on him from behind. Big, certain hands. 2 firefighters from the RIT team pulling him backward because the floor was losing the argument with gravity. Someone else reached for Ryan, a chorus of, "We've got him, we've got him." But the fire took a larger breath, and a shower of sparks became a curtain. Ethan saw Ryan's glove reaching toward him and saw nothing else. There are official ways to talk about the next part. There was a collapse. There was a rescue attempt. There was a rapid change in conditions and a withdrawal order. There was a second entry after the world stopped cracking. And there was a human being whose helmet shield would be tucked into a shadow box on a wall in a kitchen where a little girl ate cereal and stared at the empty place at the table. The department did what the department does. They wore black bands on their badges. They sent the bagpipes up the church aisle, and the drone of the pipes went through Ethan's chest like a blade. They honored Ryan like the hero he was. They hugged Emma. They folded a flag for her. They made promises to look out for his family. They wrote up the incident and reviewed it, because you always have to learn and learn again. They said Ethan saved 3 civilians. They said the beam was rotten and the storage was illegal and the building had been a trap disguised as a square box. They said the conditions changed too fast. They said no single man could change the physics of heat and steel. None of that mattered to Ethan in the quiet hours when he woke, lungs clutching at phantom smoke. He heard the mayday over and over, heard his own voice not be enough, felt the beam in his hands as if his fingers were constantly braced against it. The city kept breathing, sirens upshifting at night, and when Ladder 12 thundered past his window on another call, he sat on the edge of his bed and stared at his boots and did not put them on. He went back to work. He went through motions. But stations have smells and ghosts, and firefighters have eyes that can read each other like books. He was present, and he was not present. On a calm day, a training burn in a metal building, he felt his hands shake inside his gloves for no sane reason. He took his mask off outside and tasted clean winter air and didn't feel clean. His captain, McKenna, put a hand on his shoulder and said nothing, a kindness harder to bear than advice. Therapy helped, and it didn't. He learned terms to label the way he flinched at sudden bangs and why he slept like a man on a boat in heavy weather. He learned breathwork that could tame his heart's stampede. He learned that guilt is a stubborn animal. He sat across from a counselor who kept telling him he was allowed to grieve and also allowed to be more than this one night. He believed it for an hour at a time, the way you believe a weather report that says the storm will pass. When he resigned, McKenna met him in the parking lot behind the station, away from the kitchen table and the ribbing and the radio chatter and the smell of coffee that he would miss like a person. "I can't make the choice for you," McKenna said. "But I'll tell you this, Cole. You served. You gave. That doesn't end because you change where you stand." Ethan nodded, eyes on the cracks in the asphalt, and felt like he was setting down a life he'd trained for his entire self to carry. He drifted. He took construction shifts and couldn't stand the hiss of the acetylene torch. He tried warehouse work and left after a supervisor banged a pallet jack into a support column with a clang that turned his spine into a tuning fork. Then he found gig work, food delivery, which asked for no team, no kitchen table, no stairs when he jumped at a backfiring truck. A scooter, an app, a slot in the city's capillaries where you could move like a ghost. He told himself it was temporary until temporary became routine, and routine became how you kept breathing. He mapped the city again, but differently. Which elevators were slow, which doormen were kind, which lobbies smelled like lemon oil, and which like expensively bottled indifference. He learned to balance 2 heavy bags on his forearm without crushing the bottom boxes. He learned that some buildings had service corridors that went places the glossy hallways didn't, and some had stairwells that didn't meet the main ones head-on. Knowledge stuck to him without effort. He was still a student of spaces, still a listener to the grammar of buildings.
There were surprises. The retired teacher in Mattapan who insisted on pressing a bottle of water and a granola bar into his hand, no matter the weather. The nurse in Southie who was always too apologetic about her tips, explaining the hospital cut her overtime. The kid at a brownstone who stared at his jacket and asked with genuine awe, "Do you drive a motorcycle?" "Not cool enough to be a motorcycle," Ethan said, and the father behind the kid, bare feet on the hardwood, gave Ethan a nod that said, "I see you." And there were the others, the ones who slid their eyes over him like he wasn't there. The customer who snatched the bag without a thanks, already halfway back to his conference call. The woman who watched the app track him and called twice to ask why he wasn't in her lobby yet, and then left him a 1-star rating because he had to wait for her to come down from the 12th floor. The security guard who wouldn't let him use the bathroom even when he asked, like a person with a bladder and a job. These indignities weren't new in the world, but they rubbed at him differently. Once, he had walked into danger and people had looked at him with a kind of reverence that embarrassed him. Now he walked into expensive lobbies and became furniture. He carried a token from his old life. In the small zippered pocket inside his delivery jacket, fabric thinning at the elbows, zipper stubborn at the top, he kept a challenge coin from ladder 12. On one side, the company's crest, a ladder, and an axe. On the other, a motto, simple and unfancy. Hold the line. He didn't pull it out often. He didn't treat it like a talisman or a curse. But sometimes, after a long, rain-drowned day when his toes wrinkled in soggy socks and a stranger had used the word just in front of delivery guy as if it were a synonym for invisible, he'd sit on his scooter under an awning and thumb the coin through the fabric, not looking at it, feeling its edges like braille that meant you were a thing that mattered. He kept moving. The city rewarded motion. Spring laughed into summer. And on a few nights, the air smelled like hot asphalt and charred meat and the memory of 100 barbecues, and he'd have to shake his head to keep a different smoke from interleaving with it. He learned to keep earbuds in without sound when he wanted to be invisible, and to take them out when he needed to be present. He learned that if you held a door for a stranger with a stroller while balancing 3 stacked takeout bags, you could rewire your own day. He had delivered to the glass tower downtown enough times to know its patterns. The marble lobby was a fishbowl for important people. Security was efficient and disinterested. The main elevators were fast during peak hours and moody in the deep afternoon. The freight elevator required a key card and a phone call, and because life is what it is, a specific security guard's willingness to swipe you in. Most couriers never bothered. The main bank was quicker. But Ethan, being what he was, noticed the ways the building tucked itself together. He noticed the maintenance door in the corridor that made a Z behind a set of art installations. He noticed the way air moved when he cut down a little-used service hallway. Once, lingering because a reception desk had him waiting for a signature, he chatted with a janitor, Luis, on the night shift, who mentioned, shaking his head, how whoever designed the place had been too clever by half. "Stairwell B," Luis said, "is a mess. It lands in the wrong place. There's a connector by the maintenance shaft in the garage. Almost nobody uses it." The topic seemed trivial.
Ethan nodded, file carting it away because that's what his mind did. It made maps. He avoided the news when he could. The word fire in a headline could yank his breath out of his chest like a magician's scarf. But sometimes he'd catch a sidelong glimpse of a fire scene on a TV in a diner, white helmets bobbing, a hose line snaking, and something inside him would lean toward the screen in a small, helpless bow. He didn't tell anyone about these moments. Who would he tell? The men he used to stand shoulder to shoulder with were still standing, still shouldering. And he wasn't sure if saying hello would be a kindness or a wound. He told himself he had made choices, and choices have consequences. He told himself he had the right to live a different shape of day. On a Tuesday in late fall, he brought a bulk lunch order to an accounting firm on the 22nd floor of the glass tower.
The morning had been cold and bright, the kind of sky that looks expensive. He had 4 other deliveries stacked behind this one, and the app clucked at him with push notifications like a nervous ant. He swung the insulated bag over his shoulder and walked in through the revolving door, nodding to the security guard whose name he knew and whose gaze passed through him like sunlight through glass. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon and ambition. The building's HVAC whispered, those giant lungs doing their tireless invisible work. Ethan checked the order name, already calculating elevator times, hall distances, the part where a receptionist would make him wait for a signature while the food cooled by degrees he could feel through the bag. As he crossed the gleaming floor, a thought flared and was gone. Luis's offhand remark about Stairwell B not meeting the world where it should. About a connector near the maintenance shaft. He didn't know why the thought came. It was like noticing a bridge on a familiar skyline and thinking, oh, right, that's there. He pressed the elevator button, watched his reflection in the brushed steel. A man in a faded delivery jacket, hair that needed a cut, a face that had learned to keep its weather to itself. The elevator dinged. He stepped in. He didn't know it yet, but that trivial map in his head, the one he kept out of habit more than hope, was the difference between a lobby and a lifeline, between the polite hallway and the real way out, between the past he couldn't forgive and the future that would not be denied. The app on his phone buzzed again, urging speed. Missed ETA penalties, star ratings, invisible rungs on a ladder that didn't lean against anything that mattered. He smiled without mirth and tucked the phone away, shoulders squaring around the weight of the bag. He had a job to do, the small, concrete kind, and he was good at doing the next necessary thing. On 22, the air was colder. Offices do that. He followed a corridor that smelled of carpet glue and citrus and turned into a reception area where a woman in a gray blazer signed for the trays without looking up from her screen. "Leave them on the credenza," she said, and he did, aligning boxes with the fussy precision of a man who needs order he can control. He said, "Enjoy," and was halfway back to the elevator when he caught, very faintly at first, the wrong sound. The building spoke. Not fire yet. The hush before. A relay somewhere hiccuped, air pressure yawed, and the lights flickered like a film splice. Ethan paused. The world resumed. People chuckled. Someone joked about the grid. He walked on, every bone listening. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside with 2 suit jackets and a man whose cologne smelled like a handshake. The elevator began to hum down. 2 floors later, a bell sounded again, but not the normal one. The fire alarm's first notes came snagged, like a zipper catching. Then the full-throated wail found its pitch and sang. The suits swore. The man with the cologne hit the door open button and then didn't hit it enough. The car paused, then continued, then lurched to a halt between floors. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone said, "We're fine, it's probably a drill." The lights did their nervous dance. The alarm called through the shaft like an old friend Ethan had hoped not to hear. He felt the muscles in his forearms tighten, the old machine waking. He thought of Stairwell B, of Luis's connector, of air that moves in ways that tell truths people don't read. He looked down at his jacket, at the place inside where the coin sat, at the delivery bag on the floor by his boots, and understood that the life he had tried so hard to fold small was about to stand up. The elevator shuddered again, and then, mercifully, continued to the lobby. The doors opened on a lobby already becoming a river of people and noise. Smoke hadn't arrived yet, not thick, not visible, but the air had that tarnished taste you learn not to argue with. Ethan stepped out into the current and, before anyone told him otherwise, he listened hard. He could hear the fire now, and it was speaking his language. The lobby of the glass tower was chaos wearing a suit and tie. The alarm shrieked overhead in metallic desperation, echoing against the marble walls. People in tailored blazers and polished shoes tripped over each other in their panic, clutching laptops like life preservers, herding toward the nearest stairwell as if numbers alone could guarantee survival. Ethan stepped off the elevator into the thick of it, his delivery bag bumping against his knee. A woman dropped her phone and screamed as someone else stomped on it in the rush. A man barked orders into the air, trying to marshal co-workers who weren't listening. The receptionist who had signed for the food pressed both palms to her temples as though she could push the alarm's wail back into silence. And then, smoke. Thin at first, just a gray finger curling down from the mezzanine. But Ethan recognized it immediately. It wasn't the lazy white vapor of a burnt toaster coil. It was darker, impatient, carrying with it the bitter tang of burning wires. His throat tightened, not from the smoke, but from recognition. He'd breathed this before, and he knew what came next. "Stairwell B is closest. Go!" someone shouted. A flood of people turned left, funneling into the wide door labeled Exit. Ethan felt his chest constrict. Stairwell B. He remembered Luis's casual warning. It lands in the wrong place. There's a connector by the maintenance shaft. Almost nobody uses it. In training, they'd been taught a phrase. The closest way out is not always the safest. That truth vibrated in Ethan's bones. He hesitated. Old instincts screamed, move, lead, act. But the world saw him as just the delivery guy. Who was going to follow him? Another crash answered the question for him. Above, somewhere on the 10th floor, something gave way. A muffled roar followed by a rain of plaster dust that drifted into the lobby like a grim snowfall. The smoke thickened, coiling faster. Ethan dropped the delivery bag on the marble floor. The zipper split open, plastic containers sliding out, but nobody noticed. He tugged off his cap. His voice rose, sharper than he'd heard it in years. "Stairwell B is blocked!" Dozens of frantic eyes flicked toward him, confused, annoyed. A man in a navy suit snapped, "Who the hell are you?" Ethan squared his shoulders. His pulse pounded like a drum line, but his voice was steady. "I used to be a firefighter. This way." He pointed toward the service corridor tucked behind a decorative installation of abstract metal trees. Most people ignored him, still pushing toward Stairwell B, but a handful, 2 women clutching each other's arms, an elderly man with a cane, a young intern pale with fear, hesitated. Then the fire made the choice for them. From the left stairwell burst a rolling tongue of smoke, followed by a stampede of coughing office workers who had already tried that path. "It's blocked! It's blocked!" they shrieked. Panic surged like a rip current. Ethan didn't wait. He cut across the lobby, pushing through bodies, forcing open the unmarked service door. Beyond it, fluorescent lights flickered over a narrow hallway lined with supply closets. The air here was still breathable, for now. "Here!" he barked. "If you want to live, follow me." The corridor. The first few followed, hesitant, clinging to hope because they had none left elsewhere. Then more spilled in, desperation overruling skepticism. Ethan counted at least 15 behind him, faces flushed, coughing, some crying. The corridor was tight, built for janitors and repair crews, not panicked crowds. Ethan led with the surety of someone who had drawn maps of buildings in his head his whole life. Every echo, every draft of air told him the shape of the structure. Stay low if it gets thick. Use your jackets, your sleeves, anything over your nose and mouth, he ordered. His voice had the edge of command that brooked no argument. They shuffled forward, shoes squeaking on linoleum. Smoke licked under the door they had just come through, curling like a predator testing the seam. A young woman glanced back, eyes wide. "Oh, God." "Don't look back," Ethan snapped. "Keep moving." He reached a fork, left toward the freight elevator, right toward the maintenance hall. He remembered Luis's voice, remembered the shrug, the offhand connector by the shaft. He chose right. Resistance. Not everyone was convinced. A tall executive with silver hair and a loosened tie shoved his way forward. "This is insane. We should be with the others. The fire department will come through the main stairs." Ethan stopped dead, turned and locked eyes with him. The man had money and authority stamped in every crease of his suit, but Ethan had fire in his eyes. "Listen to me. I've pulled people out of buildings like this. I know the signs. If we go back, we choke. If we keep going, we live. Choose." The man faltered under the intensity. His jaw worked soundlessly, then he looked away. No one else argued. Heat rising. The corridor narrowed, bending around storage rooms stacked with crates. Smoke chased them, darker now, thicker. A woman coughed until she gagged. The elderly man stumbled. Ethan doubled back, slinging the man's arm over his own shoulder. "Lean on me, keep walking," he urged. He felt the heat intensifying, the building's breath turning feverish. Somewhere above, sprinklers hissed to life, but here, the pipes rattled uselessly. The fire was ahead of the water. At last, they reached the metal door Ethan had been searching for. A red stenciled warning screamed, "Authorized personnel only." He shouldered it open. The hinges screamed, but it gave way. Behind it was the narrow maintenance shaft, a spine of steel and concrete. Cool air filtered faintly from below. The garage. Salvation. The descent. "This is it," Ethan said, turning to the group. His voice softened, less command now, more steady reassurance. "One at a time. Hold the rail. It's a long climb, but it takes us straight to the garage. Go." They stared at the ladder bolted to the wall, doubt and fear etched in their faces. The shaft was narrow, dark, claustrophobic. But behind them the corridor trembled as the fire began its hungry advance. The young intern went first, knuckles white on the rail, descending rung by rung into the shadows. The others followed, awkward, clumsy, but moving. Ethan stayed at the back, urging, coaxing, checking. Halfway through, the executive froze. I can't do this." His voice cracked, echoing up the shaft. Ethan's reply was iron. "Yes, you can. One more rung, then another. Don't think about the rest." Slowly, painfully, the man obeyed. The collapse. They were 2/3 down when the building above groaned like a wounded animal. A thunderous crack split the air. Dust rained into the shaft. A roar followed, the sound of floors giving way. The group screamed. One woman nearly lost her grip. Ethan lunged, steadying her with a hand on her wrist. His shoulders strained, but he held firm until she found her footing again. "Keep moving!" he shouted, voice echoing. "We're almost there!" At last, feet hit the concrete floor of the garage. One by one, they spilled out, gasping, sobbing, clinging to each other in disbelief. Ethan was last. His arms trembled from the effort, his lungs burning, but he climbed down and dropped onto the cool garage floor. They were alive. The parking garage sirens wailed outside now, close and urgent. Through the garage ramp, Ethan saw red lights strobing, engines pulling up, firefighters leaping from the trucks. His old world, arriving late but still fighting. The group collapsed in relief, some hugging, some crying. The young intern looked at Ethan with wide, awestruck eyes. You saved us! Ethan shook his head, wiping soot from his brow. I just remembered the way out. But the truth echoed inside him. His past, the one he had tried so hard to bury, had saved them all. The parking garage was heavy with silence, broken only by coughing and the distant thunder of flames above. The group of survivors huddled together like shipwrecked sailors who had just crawled onto shore, their business suits crumpled, their faces streaked with soot. Some clung to each other. Others sat in stunned disbelief, staring at the concrete floor as if it alone had kept them alive. Ethan Cole leaned against a steel column, his lungs still raw, his jacket burned in patches. His arms trembled from adrenaline and exertion. He wanted to fade into the background, to vanish as quietly as he had appeared. But invisibility, the armor he had worn for years, no longer seemed possible. Too many eyes were on him now, grateful, searching, questioning. One of the women, the intern who had frozen on the ladder, wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and whispered, "He saved us." Her voice carried in the cavernous garage, fragile yet insistent. Others nodded. The elderly man with the cane limped forward and touched Ethan's sleeve. "I thought I was gone," he said simply. "But you knew." His eyes glistened. Ethan shook his head. "No, I just remembered the building. That's all." His voice cracked under the weight of his own denial. Outside, the wail of sirens grew louder. Then came the rhythmic thunder of boots, the unmistakable sound of firefighters pouring into the inferno above. Their radios crackled with clipped urgency. Their helmets gleamed under the red flash of strobes. Ethan felt a pang deep in his chest. He knew that rhythm, that choreography of purpose. It was the heartbeat of a life he had once belonged to and walked away from. Recognition. "Casualties? Survivors?" A voice boomed from the ramp. A firefighter in full turnout gear sprinted down, scanning the group. His eyes widened at the sight of so many alive. Relief washed across his soot-smudged face. We came through the maintenance shaft," one of the survivors explained breathlessly. "He led us." She pointed at Ethan. The firefighter's gaze swung to him. Ethan stiffened, bracing for dismissal, skepticism. Instead, the man froze, helmet tilting as though he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Slowly, he lifted his mask. Ethan Cole? It was McKenna. Older now, with more lines around his eyes, but the same steady presence Ethan remembered from Ladder 12's kitchen table. His voice carried disbelief and something softer, something dangerously close to hope. The group of survivors looked from one man to the other, realization dawning. This wasn't just a delivery guy. He had been one of them, one of the ones who ran into fire when others ran out. Ethan's throat closed. He wanted to deny it, to shake his head, to retreat into silence. But McKenna was already striding forward, gripping his shoulder with a gloved hand. "You're alive," he said fiercely, almost angrily. "All this time, and you're still here." Ethan swallowed hard. I couldn't come back." His voice was barely audible over the wail of alarms. "After Ryan..." McKenna's grip tightened. "Don't. Not here. Not now." Ghosts of the past. The name was a knife. Ryan. His partner. His brother. The one he hadn't saved. Images flooded back unbidden. The beam crashing down. The desperate heave of his arms. Ryan's gloved hand reaching for him through the curtain of sparks. And then nothing.
That void had followed Ethan into every waking moment since. His knees threatened to give. But then another hand touched him, smaller, trembling. The intern again. "Who's Ryan?" she asked softly, not with curiosity but with the raw innocence of someone who sensed the name mattered. Ethan looked at her, at all of them, the survivors who owed him their lives. For years, he had carried the weight of one life lost. Tonight, he had given back 15. The math didn't erase the pain, but it shifted something inside him. A recalibration. He closed his eyes. "Ryan, I couldn't save you. But maybe I can still honor you." The transfer of hands. McKenna turned to his crew. "Get them outside. EMS is staging on the street." The firefighters swarmed in, guiding the dazed survivors toward safety. But many of them looked back at Ethan as they went, eyes shining with gratitude. Some mouthed words he didn't want to hear. Hero, thank you, savior. When the last had gone, Ethan and McKenna stood alone in the echoing garage. Above them, the building groaned, fire devouring steel. "You never stopped being one of us," McKenna said quietly. "You think walking away erased it? It didn't. Look what you just did." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't deserve—" McKenna cut him off. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. You answered. That's all that matters." Ethan's eyes burned hotter than the smoke. He wanted to argue, to retreat back into guilt, but the truth pressed against him like a tide. He had answered. The release outside, the night was alive with chaos. Fire trucks lined the block, hoses snaked across asphalt, ladders punched toward the sky. Survivors sat wrapped in blankets, oxygen masks strapped to their faces. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. When Ethan emerged, a hush rippled through the survivors. Some pointed, some cried, some reached for him as if touching him confirmed he was real. The executive who had doubted him earlier limped forward, shame carved into his face. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I thought you were nobody. I was wrong." Ethan looked at him for a long moment, then simply nodded. Forgiveness didn't need words tonight. The coin. Later, seated on the back of an ambulance with an oxygen mask over his face, Ethan reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. His fingers found the challenge coin of ladder 12, worn smooth from years of handling. He turned it in his palm, the motto catching in the dim light. Hold the line. For years he had thought the line was broken, that he had failed to hold it, that Ryan's death was proof. But tonight, he realized something he had never allowed himself to see. The line wasn't about never losing. It was about standing firm, again and again, no matter how many times you fell. He pressed the coin into the intern's soot-streaked hand. She blinked in confusion. "You kept going," he told her gently. "Even when you froze, you kept going. Hold on to this. Remember it." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded, clutching the coin like a lifeline. The quiet after. As dawn broke, the fire was finally beaten back. The building smoldered, scarred, but still standing. Survivors were reunited with families. News crews broadcast stories of miraculous escapes, and Ethan's name was whispered in awe. But he slipped away before the cameras could catch him, blending into the thinning crowd. He walked to his scooter, burned delivery bag still strapped to the back. The city hummed awake around him, unaware of the lives saved in the night. Ethan looked up at the gray sky, at the smoke dissolving into morning light. For the first time in years, the air didn't taste like guilt. It tasted like possibility. He pulled on his helmet, engine buzzing beneath him. Not just a delivery man, not just a former firefighter, but a man who had faced the fire again, and this time walked out whole. Closing lines. And as he rode into the waking city, Ethan carried nothing with him but the sound of Ryan's voice, clear at last in his memory. "We're getting coffee after this, Cole, so don't get dead." For the first time, Ethan smiled. He wasn't dead. He was alive. And he was ready to live.